How do we judge a piece of music? How do we differentiate between a good piece of music and a bad one? Perceiving the value in music requires us to deepen our understanding of music. Deepening our understanding of any subject can help us understand and see value where we didn't see it before. It's like learning to play a sport. If we understand the physicality of it, the strategy, the training required to play a sport, our understanding of it will deepen. We could appreciate athletes that are playing at the highest level and understand some of what's going on in the game in a deeper way. Or deepening our understanding of literature can help us recognize great writing when we come across it. There are countless things in our culture that are built on innovations and traditions. Meaning is embedded in so many pieces of work that if we're not carefully looking, we could miss a lot. In music, how can we listen in a way that goes beyond the surface and the norms? How can we find value in music that we come across? And when we dismiss a piece of music, what in our approach or perspective has deemed it so? The study of music, as it's taught in universities, presides over two main genres, classical and jazz. Just one example from the classical realm is Schenkerian analysis. Developed by Heinrich Schenker, this method of analysis focuses on the underlying layers of music. It seeks to strip music, especially seemingly complex pieces, down to simple patterns of tension and release in order to understand harmonic functions and form. Schenker has been a point of controversy in the academic world, but independently from that, I'm not here to say that there is anything wrong with Schenkerian analysis itself. It's in part because of this method that I learned to understand certain fundamentals of music while I was in school. It was a great entry point for me to understand harmonic cadences. It also made the work of great composers more available to me. Where I once just focused mainly on rock and blues guitar, this type of study brought in my framework for analysis of music, and I began to perceive music in a different way. The fundamental premise of jazz is collaborative improvisation. A jazz musician's task is to improvise over the chord changes. And of course, the difficulty varies from standard to standard. Standards can get very complex, very fast, and very frequent chord changes, and some are more diatonic. Regardless, it requires the improviser to be familiar with harmony, how to improvise with arpeggios, improvise melodies, go off of the main theme, motivic development, all kinds of things. And it's not to say that the most valuable contribution of these two genres lies in harmonic content. There are countless components that go into the musical DNA of these two genres, like texture, rhythm, feel, style, music. So why is there so much focus on harmony? Don't get me wrong, I love a tasty set of chord changes just as much as the next guy. I think it's because harmony, it's a little bit easier to study, especially in an academic setting. You can look at it on a piece of paper, you can see which notes are where and what chords they form, inversions, movement, structure. It's also easier to test for what's right and wrong, which notes belong in what chord and what their function is. It's easier to write about that. You can get some pretty good papers going just on harmony. And I think it's a little bit more difficult to quantify things like texture and dynamics. Even though these markings are all over sheet music, it can be hard to analyze these things in the same way and detail as we do with harmony. But these things really matter, and they make a huge difference when it comes to music. For example, we can take the same chord progression and vary things like the context, instrumentation, texture, dynamics, delivery, and you're gonna get very different results. Let it be, let it be, let it be. You're glad I come around. Let it go, let it go. I am one with the wind and sky. This is to say this, that ultimately, harmony doesn't tell the whole story behind a piece of music. There are so many variables that go into how we perceive and experience music. For example, take tension. There are so many ways to build tension in music. Sure, using harmony is one way. You go from the tonic to the dominant, you're building tension right off the bat. But there's so many other ways to build tension. It can be done with dynamics. Is she red? Is she white? Is she promised to the night? Is she red? Is she white? Is she promised to the night? It can be done with lyrics. My friend is so depressed. She wanted to have sex. I pissed in the kitchen sink. She slowly undressed. And the way we learn music theory relies so heavily on melodic and harmonic content that it doesn't really give us a framework in which these other things may fit. There are academics who are researching new ways to analyze modern music, and they're writing about it quite a bit. It's really interesting. Mark Spicer wrote this paper on accumulative form, and this is the technique of building up a groove gradually from its continuant parts, and is often the defining feature of smaller formal units within a larger composition. A strategy usually used at the beginning of a song where the components of a groove are gradually introduced. A great example of this is a new song by Queens of the Stone Age called Time and Place. They kind of play with the listener's expectations. Take a look. Go. The guitar is a syncopated pattern of 3 notes, and it can trick the listener as to where the downbeat is and where the overall groove sits. This doesn't become apparent until the drums and the bass come in. It's a great example of accumulative form. The band is using sophisticated compositional techniques, messing with our expectations. Listening to an accumulative beginning is not unlike assembling the pieces of an oral jigsaw puzzle. Only when all the layers of the groove are put together can we understand the complete picture. Another great paper was written by Megan L. Lavengood, The Cultural Significance of Timbre Analysis, a case study in the 1980s pop music, texture, and narrative. She presents a method for analyzing timbre that combines a spectrogram analysis and cultural analysis. A spectrogram shows us frequencies in a sound and how they change over time, demonstrating both fundamental pitches and overtones, as we perceive a single sound with its own unique timbre. She basically defines 5 layers that make up musical content. There is the beat layer, the functional bass layer, melodic layer, and harmonic filler layer. These should not be shocking if you studied music before. That's kind of like basic instrumentation for a rock band, especially something in the 80s. But she contributes one more layer, the novelty layer, which is usually filmed with a world instrument, and it's something that in terms of texture and timbre shouldn't really fit in the normal instrumentation. She goes on to put this into context by writing about the popularity of the Dx7 synthesizer in the 80s and how it made sampling super accessible. For example, in Tina Turner's What's Love Got to Do With It introduces a flute to fulfill the function of the novelty layer. It contains melodic content, yet it serves as a different function, often in opposition of the melodic layer, or creating a kind of call and response effect here. What Is Love by Howard Jones is also heavy on the Dx7 presets, including the flute or pan flute and tub bell functioning as the novelty layer. I'm not suggesting that you start going through all these dense academic papers or that you throw out your theory textbooks and start analyzing music from scratch. I don't even know what that would look like. But quite the opposite. Keep everything that you've learned so far and use it as a frame of reference. I use rhythmic notation and my understanding of it to transcribe the Queens of the Stone Age example. It would have been really hard to convey what was happening in the music without using that system. But what I didn't do is reduce the music down to 1 or 2 chord changes on a lead sheet. I tried to meet the music on its own terms, and if the feature was a rhythmic pattern, then that's how I approach the music. What I'm suggesting is that you take each piece of music you come across and adjust your perspective and analytical approach to meet the music on its terms. Ask, what's going on in here? Is a harmonic approach appropriate for what the music is offering here? Or for example, you could take something like rap music and dismiss it because of how simple the harmonic changes are, rather than seeing that the value that that music can bring lies more in its lyrics and rhythmical approach. We can end up missing so much value in music if we're just looking at things from our ethnocentric music theory system. There is certain music that just won't fall into that. African drum circles, there's no chord changes there. Latin American music, it can be very simple in terms of harmony, but there are so many other things going on, like odd meter, melodies. So I would suggest that you challenge yourself as a listener. Take a second look when you dismiss music of something not being good. Maybe you're right, it's not that good, but I would put up a follow-up question of why? What's in the music that's making you say it's not good? I've often found that by digging a little deeper, I usually find things in the music that I missed right off from the first bat. And I'm usually glad I took the time to see what's in the music. It raises my awareness, it broadens my perspective, and it just puts me on to so many different things. It's super fun. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Till next time.